giving back to GIZ for supporting this initiative. Please stand up on your feet and give a rousing appreciation to GIZ. Please do that.
So thank you so much, and also to the entire management. Pass our appreciation.
Document that is required.
So in the case
Yes,
where
but where you are non-compliant,
yes,
where you are, I've said where you are compliant,
yes,
that process must be completed within the service level, the time agreed on by that department.
We're going to hear from your representative, who will also give us a few remarks in less than 5 minutes. And then, once he's done, we'll see your performance. So get ready, embrace yourself, whether you're going to start from there and come through. Let us know how much space you want.
Hi, Kaze. How are you?
I am good. I think we lost Kemi.
Yeah. So are you on your laptop? Maybe you can share the song and everything.
No, I'm on my phone. Just wait one second. You might be joining.
Yeah,
Wow.
sure.
There might be something with our emails, because I couldn't also. Let's see.
Receive a reminder or something? I received mine too.
I received, but for me it was refusing. Let me see if join through the computer. Because from Kemi, I think that's where we can be live, or we are already live.
Yeah,
we are
ready.
live. Okay, I'm just going to, sorry guys, we just had like a brief technical issue there on my end, but we're just going to give folks a couple of more minutes to get into the Zoom. So I'll just share a few videos as we wait. Sorry again for that.
Tusonga mbele mama Afrika, Afrika, Tusonga mbele mama Afrika, Afrika,
Honorable Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa, distinguished East African leaders, ladies and gentlemen, our dear youth, good afternoon. It's impossible to create a better world without bettering the lot of women. The world cannot be a better place if women's conditions are not better in it, wrote Tajuddin Abdul Rahim, and may his soul rest in peace. While these words were penned in 2006, they still resonate now despite our country's advances of the past 15 years in granting women equal status, equal opportunities, and equal protection under the law. Perhaps the greatest indicator of how much further our fight must take us is the fact that discussions on female equality are still being held, and justifiably so. And still in view of the cultivation and employment of female potential that must be achieved to reach our 2063 development goals, greater efforts must be invested.
Muhimu tunahitaji kujituma, kujitoa, uadilifu, uaminifu ili kulijenga taifa aminifu. Na hasa vijana mnaposhiriki kwenye matukio mbalimbali ya uzalishaji mali, wale wazee wenye umri wa kati waendelee kuwa na matumaini makubwa na vijana ambao ndio nyie hapa.
Today I'm joined by my fellow co-moderator.
My name is Eric and I'll be co-moderating with Diana on this Gender Equality Forum.
Yes.
We are very excited to have you participating here with us and taking part in this engagement.
Actually, we need support because it is not very easy, especially the younger you are, the more difficult it is for you to even get into these spaces.
Introduce our next speaker, who is Laura Bass. Okay.
Yes.
So Laura, as the Dutch Youth Ambassador for SRHR and Bodily Autonomy, how can we support you by connecting with youth from across Africa to ensure broader outreach and impact?
The best way to help me is to make sure that young people can participate actively in society. My name is Laura Bas, I'm 25 years old and I'm the Youth Ambassador for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, Bodily Autonomy and Gender Equality within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In one sentence, my job is to make sure that the voices and needs of young people from all around the world are represented in the policies that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs make.
Do you think climate justice component is strong within the Action Coalition's commitments?
When we talk about, for example, why Africa is going to be hit the hardest by the crisis, we must acknowledge why that is. So this requires us to address legacies of colonialism, imperialism, neoliberal capitalism, and how these manifest and affect our ability as African people to self-determine in these economic global systems that are built on hierarchies and that centers profit over people.
So from your perspective as a young woman, how do you think we can organize ourselves to position young women at the front line for the Action Coalition's agenda?
First and foremost, young women can start by popularizing the commitments that were made during the Generation Equality Forum. If given a chance, young women are definitely able to come up with very innovative ideas that would aid the government in rolling out and advancing the implementation of the commitments in their communities.
ULEAD Summit 2020 theme was Development is People, Youth at the Center of the Peace and Development Agenda. The summit was brought closer to thousands of delegates through a specially designed virtual summit platform, making it possible for delegates to participate through a hybrid setup that was adopted when the COVID-19 situation limited cross-border travel. With the Regional Summit Center in Arusha, Tanzania, at the East African Community Headquarters, and National Summit Centers in Bujumbura, Kampala, Kigali, Nairobi, and Juba, An even broader online audience was able to participate. Day 1 was dedicated to youth in politics, the East Africa Under 40 Political Leaders Forum, reinventing leadership for East African millennials. The summit facilitated a set of intergenerational conversations between young leaders, policymakers, and key national and regional political actors in order to solidify a common purpose, understanding, and solidarity between them. The Nairobi Summit Center played host for Day 1, and key sessions were held simultaneously via live telecasts between the EAC headquarters in Arusha, Nairobi, and Juba, providing for a unique hybrid experience. The highlight of the summit and Day 1 was the acceptance by His Excellency Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, former President of the United Republic of Tanzania, to become the patron of ULEAD. Key outcomes launched the process of developing the East African Youth Governance Architecture Report and the East African Youth Manifesto, the East Africa We Want, broadcasted an intergenerational roundtable dialogue on the leadership for the East Africa We Want, and a roundtable conversation on the leadership for the East African Community We Want to inform the curriculum for the East African Emerging Leaders Fellowship Program. Day 1 also featured the Gender Equality Forum, young women mobilizing towards Goal 5 of Agenda 2030 and Aspiration 6 of Agenda 2063. Young and senior women gathered virtually and in Arusha for an intergenerational conversation on young women's participation in leadership towards realizing meaningful inclusion of young women in good governance and leadership, to tackle several questions which had been raised and co-created by young women in the region through the leadership of Plan International Kenya. And of course, the icing on the cake on Day 1 was the evening fireside chat with His Excellency Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, who freely mingled with the young people and shared words of wisdom with the delegates. Day 2 was dedicated to the East African Youth Forum on Peace, Youth at the Center of Peace Building and Conflict Prevention. The forum was dedicated to providing an opportunity for youth to have their voice heard and strengthen their ability to engage in peace and security and contribute towards building an effective, well-coordinated, and responsive youth sector that acts in solidarity within the region. The discussions focused on the vulnerability of youth in conflicts in the region and the role youth can play in peace building, ensuring sustainable security and stability in East Africa. The forum was led by the ULEAD Consortium in South Sudan, with sessions at the EAC headquarters, Arusha, Juba, and virtually. The chief guest being Rebecca Garang, Vice President of the Republic of South Sudan. Key interventions proposed in the forum include consolidate an East Africa Youth Network for conflict prevention and peace building, capacity building for young peace builders on reconciliation, mediation, and arbitration, peer-to-peer roundtable conversation for experience sharing on the implementation of peace and conflict resolution mechanisms, peace building advocacy training for youth in the region, and capacity building for youth on implementation of UNSCR 2250. A series of high-value breakout sessions were also held in the afternoon, facilitated by a number of consortium members. Day 3 was dedicated to the East Africa Under 40 Business Leaders Forum, accelerating economic opportunities and decent work for youth, and the East African Youth Enterprise Awards. Introduced in November 2019, the forum has gained traction in the region, especially amongst young CEOs, entrepreneurs, and innovators. The 2020 forum, jointly hosted by Burundi and Rwanda, was composed of well-structured sets of sessions focusing on youth-specific policy and capacity issues, resulting in a set of outcomes that could be taken up by the EAC member states, development partners, and other actors. In addition, the ULEAD program piloted its first ever East African Youth Enterprise Awards, recognizing youth-led businesses across the East African community, the partner states which in the current COVID-19 pandemic global context had managed to remain resilient and are simultaneously taking deliberate, innovative actions towards providing decent livelihoods and confronting the most pressing issues of our region, especially those affecting women and youth. Day 4 was dedicated to post-summit agenda development, as well as creating a strong alumni network, the ULEAD Action Network, and the agenda of action based on the outcomes of the national level pre-summit events. This resulted in a common regional agenda for action and country-specific interventions. Day 5 was a follow-up of Day 2 and was dedicated to combating violent extremism and promoting safety online, resources for youth-led NGOs. The session was facilitated by Facebook, with panelists and participants joining both virtually and in Arusha, Tanzania. To all our lead partners for 2020, thank you for your continued commitment to ULEAD ambitions. Your participation and support have enabled us to meet several of our goals for 2020. We look forward to continued success together with these collaborations as we pursue the post-summit agenda implementation.
Wairimu, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to, sorry, just 1 second.
Naona hivi.
Sorry about that. I was just fixing some settings. But other than that, good evening, everyone. My name is Wairimu Manyara, and I'll be your host for episode 21 of the You Lead Unplugged series. So today's theme is going to be focused specifically with the One Young EAC for Kenya 2022 campaign. And we're going to be looking at selling your right to accountable leadership, and basically looking generally around issues of voter bribery and voter bribery around the electioneering process. Okay, so I think without further ado, let's just say hi to a few of the panelists that are currently here and just get to know them a little bit. I think we have Bina here. Bina, are you present?
Yes.
All right. John, are you here? I think Miriam is here. But Miriam, are you here?
Yes, Wairimu, hi.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I think before we proceed, just say hello to everyone. Okay, so I think before we continue, we'd first like to begin by talking about what exactly we're here to do today, what exactly the campaign is about, and why we chose to focus this specific theme this evening on voter bribery. Okay, so what exactly is the 1 year? I'm so sorry, 1 second. So what exactly is the One Young EAC for Peace Kenya 2022? It's a youth-led and it's a youth-led and youth-championed regional youth solidarity program that's going to be focused on online campaigning. And in this case, we're going to be working with several consortium partners who are going to be present today. I think some of them are on the panel, I think, in terms of ELF, but just to briefly acknowledge some of our consortium partners that are here today, I think in terms of Africa Youth Trust, Karibu Sana, thank you. The Center for Multi-Party Democracy, Emerging Leaders Foundation, Kenyan Young Parliament Association, Nairobians, and Run for Office and Action Aid Kenya. Thank you very much for being present today. Okay, so I think without further ado, we'll begin guest introduction so this doesn't necessarily take a long time. And I think first we'll begin with Bina. If you don't mind telling us your name, what you do briefly, and also telling us your favorite song and your favorite color. Bina?
Hi, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Oh, great. My name is Bina Maseno. I run and serve at an organization called Badili Africa. And at Badili Africa, we're passionate about cultivating the political engagement of Chama women. These are women who organize in merry-go-rounds. And we are also cultivating the political engagement of young women in the universities, and also young women and young men in urban informal settlements. And we use makeup and beauty to show young women how politics affects them. And I think lastly, we also look at sexual and gender-based violence, trying to end sexual and gender-based violence as a key deterrent to women participating effectively in leadership spaces. also a former political aspirant. I always like joking that I didn't lose, they stole my votes. Favorite song is I Am a Superwoman. I think it's I think it's a couple of musicians from Tanzania actually, but that is one of actually my top favorite song of 2022. Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Asante. Okay, asante sana. Bina will now have Miriam give us a brief introduction of themselves, and you can also tell us your favorite song and also additionally your favorite food.
Food. Okay, my name is Miriam Beatrice. I work with Emerging Leaders Foundation Africa. I hope I'm audible enough. And what we do at ELF, we inspire a generation of values-based leaders. And it is very critical that we are having this conversation today, because part of what we do is to advocate for values in electoral processes. Other than that, I am a political animal. I am very passionate about gender. I am policy and research enthusiast as well, and I practice privately as a consultant in that field. It's a pleasure being here. My favorite color, orange. My favorite food. This is such cliche, but I've been having burgers this entire burger week, so it's beginning to be my favorite my favorite type of food. But it's a pleasure being here. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here. And yes, I also love burgers as well, but I think it's also good from the first two panelists to hear, I think, a lot of gender or female-centered work that you're doing. So thank you for that. So we'll have the third panelist, John Musila. Please introduce yourself. Karibu.
Thank you very much, Wairimu. I am sorry that I just tuned in a bit late, so I didn't know the order on which the introductions were being done. However, I'll just say my name. I'm John Muisio Musila. I am 28 years old. I'm an engineering graduate and a community champion in Kibera. I've done work around issues on gender, youth, leadership and governance. But now, most importantly, why I'm here is I am running in these coming elections to be the area MCA for Lindy Ward, which is in Kibra constituency and Nairobi County. I'll be looking forward to sharing a few insights in there. But like I said, I didn't catch much on what the introduction ought to look like, so I just say that in brief.
All right, thank you for that. I think without further ado, we'll just jump straight into the discussion. And so just to begin, maybe a few thoughts exactly on what's been happening, given the fact that this is campaign year, and there's just generally a lot of activities undergoing. I think several things generally in terms of yes, just several things in terms of voter bribery and everything. I think voter bribery is not something is not uncommon in the context that we exist within, and I think it exists within different forms. And the conversation that we're going to be having today is just to be able to divulge a lot of what exists specifically within voter bribery, the impacts that this will have. Does it mean then that you can't necessarily claim accountability? And yes, Karibu John, we've just begun, so you haven't necessarily missed much. Okay, so before we begin, hello Africa and welcome. So you can type on the comments and please let us know where you're watching from, where you're listening from, and we'll have a brief session, I think, at the end of the first round of panels, just to have a few questions here and there concerning several issues that we're having. So please engage with us, let us know on the chats. Okay, so I think we'll begin. So I think we'll begin the questions, and I will start, I think, first with Miriam. So Miriam, given the fact that I think you deal with a lot of policy, specifically with elections and accountability, how do you think that voter bribery exists within this country? Do you think there are different forms? Is it structural? Is it mainly informal? Just how exactly does voter bribery exist within the context of not only Kenya, right? But I think we're also talking within a regional context.
Thanks, Wairimu. And as you've rightly put it, it is not a unique scenario in our country, and it is a component that a lot of African countries and globally really they're struggling with. And to put it at a broader context, it is within the elections offenses. So if you look at it like that, it runs all the way from even before we start campaigning. We are talking about hate speech. We are talking about negative ethnicity. We are talking about bribery, both within party primaries and during elections. So it is a whole lot of issues that lead up to voter bribery. I was also reading a report sometime last week that when you're talking about bribery, we do not necessarily mean the exchange of monetary, value or in kind. It can also be a form of, and this again falls under election offense where they're calling it negative turnout buying, where you're bought to actually stay at home and not participate during elections. So it can take very many forms, where politicians will buy you alcohol so that you don't show up or you don't turn up on that particular day. That still falls under the elections offenses. And I know, and I think we'll get into that a bit later, there are institutions, particular independent institutions that have been set up. There are, I think, 9 or so that are supposed to deal with this sort of monies.
Okay, thank you for that, Miriam. I think, yes, it's very clear that there are different forms and different ways in which they exist. I think for me, just learning something new in terms of being bought not to participate. So maybe there's voter bribery when it comes to voter apathy. And I think just learning a lot from this. So secondly, I think we can go to John. And John, I think given the fact that you told us that you're running for MCA within your ward, what challenges, or rather, as a candidate, specifically as a youth candidate, how do you think that voter bribery specifically affects you as someone who's running for a certain position within the locality that you exist within?
Thank you very much. So once again, I am John Muisio for those who've just tuned in. But like Adalia said, I am running to be area MCA for Lindy Ward. And the challenges I'm facing, and especially being a young person who's just come straight from college and has this passion of serving the community and wants to offer leadership that has been missing in my community, is the nature in which our politics are played around the country and maybe world over. It is that politics thrives in vulnerabilities. So we try to make people as much vulnerable as possible, so that when we come in, and like Miriam is saying, it is not only giving handouts in terms of money, but we're giving somebody, maybe a woman who's been in the Soko, you've given them an apron branded on your name, so they have a new one that they can change with another woman here as a lesso that they didn't have, or they couldn't even afford. The young people who are not employed, and now it's their time to wear those reflectors as they ride their border, so that they give you advertisement. And all these will come to attract some resources in terms of finances, because again, you have to print them, you have to do all these things. And even the guys on the border, when you're doing a rally, they will not just come to support you because you're an aspirant and you have an ideology. So the biggest challenge is, one, even as progressive of a manifesto you would have, you still have to push it with something. You see, like the nature of Arambes during those days, somebody gives a contribution and then they ask people to syndikiza the contributions. That is what has been a major challenge. So people are open to listen before it is serious crowds, but when it is serious crowds, everyone has their hands very straight. They want to receive something. They really don't care if you have a progressive agenda or not. They only care that you're a candidate. And so every time they see me as a candidate, they see some hope that they are going to get something, whether 100 bob or a t-shirt or a cap. And all that then makes it very, very difficult even for my movements, because you fear that if you're not able to give something on that particular day, then you're not able to get a good listening ear on your agenda. So it becomes very, very difficult for young candidates to just campaign holistically, because our predecessors are even now doing it the way they do it best. They are giving those handouts. And so if you do not give, you look like the odd one out. So people don't even want now to associate very closely with you. And if you have people who are supporting you, they're even saying they will support you silently because they do not want to be affected, not to be invited to other campaign schedules for other candidates who can give something in return. So this is a major challenge. Thank you, Irimo.
Thank you so much, John. I think we lost you for a bit, but thank you so much for those comments. Just to confirm, and just maybe a slight follow-up on a lot of what you've said. So given the fact that you're straight maybe out of university and you might not necessarily have as much access to capital, do you think that the existing system of voter bribery is one that puts you at a systematic disadvantage when it comes to your political campaign?
Yes, automatically. That is very systemic, and it puts not only me, but every other young candidate who does not have capital to run a moneyed campaign.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think, again, just to reiterate, if you're joining us now, let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. Glad to see we have people coming in from Tanzania. I think we have a lot of people from Uganda, Karibu Sana, as we continue with the conversation. Okay, so I think now we can go to Bina, and I think specifically within the context that Bina exists within. So Bina, you talked about Badili and running this civics and running this space and how it deals with a lot of like civic engagements. So what do you think spaces like the one you exist in, such as Badili, can do in terms of improving or resolving the situation around voter bribery in Kenya right now, or rather within the region?
Thank you. I think first of all, it's important to interrogate also reasons that lead to voter bribery, and that also push young people to take bribes, and also the environment with which the young people exist that either is not friendly for even their businesses to thrive, does not support their education, does not open up space for them to live to their fullest potential, but also at the same time also look at the institutions, look at the system that also clear leaders who fuel voter bribery, because at times I often think we also shift like the burden onto the voters 100%. Yet we have institutions that actually clear corrupt leaders who do not actually mind, bribing voters, who do not mind actually doing all the things the first speaker was talking about, and also I think we also have to interrogate the kind of leadership that we've had, even right now as we're going into the polls. With the agenda of the current political class, the big four agenda in terms of in the Kenyan context, how has that even benefited young people? So if young people are even looking at a system that has not served them, that has not even opened up space for them, the rate of unemployment in Kenya currently, young people bear the brunt of it. Young people can't even afford healthcare services. Urban informal settlements are filled with young people. Sexual gender-based violence is affecting young women. Femicide is, we have young women dying who are below 25. So I think when you look at all this and you feel like there's no leader who understands how to transform this situation, that is number one. But then number two, it's interesting that you're saying that because we've been working in both private and public institutions of higher learning. And we even had majority or maybe a fraction of the young people we worked with, we engaged, are not even registered voters. And you ask someone, why are you not even a registered voter? And you can see the disconnect between how voting translates to quality of life, their ability to connect how does voting translate to me actually being able to afford decent work, education, opportunities, right? So I think there's that. And then number two, there's, I think what one of the aspirant is talking about, and I also want to look at young people's engagement within political parties, because political parties hugely decide or heavily decide also who's going to win the election ultimately, right? So how many even young people participate when it comes to political party primaries to even elect good leaders? Like even the young, like the young leader who's on this call, is it John? Who's on this call today? So I think the disconnect between how systems function, how voting translates to quality of life, understanding even the different roles of the political leaders, because you can't have a quality conversation if you don't even understand the different roles. It's interesting. Again, last week we were having a conversation with grassroots women leaders, and we're just interrogating, because some of them are mobilized for politicians. So we're interrogating, what do you know about the roles of a senator, the roles of an MC, the roles of an MP? And there's a woman who's in the strategic team of a senator, and she says the reason actually she's very passionate about this senator is because once he wins, she's sure he is going to give bursaries for her children. I mean, that's not the role of a senator. You listen to the things they're talking about in terms of what the NCA is promising to give them or to help them with once they occupy office. It's also the disconnect. So it means if you don't even know the roles of your leader, you cannot have a quality conversation. You cannot challenge them in terms of their mandate if you don't understand what their roles actually are. Yeah. So I think we're trying to bridge that gap at the learning institutions, at the urban informal settlement, and within women's groups and collectives, especially in the urban informal settlements. Thanks.
All right, thank you for that. I think that was extremely profound, specifically within the context of, and maybe this is not also only young people, right? But a large percentage of the population, right, is not fully aware of the systems of governance that are in place, the mechanisms and everything. So these are the same individuals who then go to the ballot, right? And there's this expectation to have some form of voting without the maybe proper sensitization or even like proper understanding of the system. So I think that's a very good point, and I think very profound in identifying some of the issues and barriers that generally come about with voter bribery. Just a quick follow-up, I think, Bina, in terms of a point that you had talked about, right? I think you talked about various institutions within the country and how those institutions have been put in place. I think, talking about maybe institutions such as IEBC, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, what barriers do you think that are existent, right? Or maybe are things that, or what barriers can be overcome to be able to better ensure that we have stricter mechanisms for enforcement against things such as voter bribery?
I think, first of all, don't clear leaders with zero values, who don't even adhere to integrity, corrupt leaders. Because you see, at the end of the day, you find that once even an institution like Ethics and Anti-Corruption Body clears a corrupt leader who then ends up in a political party ticket, who wins a political party ticket in a popular area, so already they have a head start at the end of the day. That thing in terms of the menu, even when you go to a restaurant and they tell you they only have chicken or meat, and you have to choose either chicken or meat, you see, at the end of the day. So then being able to facilitate even corrupt leaders being able to interact and actually seek for votes, that is one. But even for institutions like IEBC, I think we need to start civic education way early, because half the time we carry out civic education a few months to election, which actually solves just a fraction, in terms of bridges that gap of the information gap in a very small way. So you find at the end of the day, most people, even when you look at the conversation right now, even what I was saying earlier, whether it's the roles and even just understanding your rights, and the power we have even through our Kenyan constitution, Even these articles like Article 43, in terms of what you know, your rights as a citizen. If you don't even know your rights as a citizen, then how are you going to demand for those particular rights? So I think even for institutions like them, is to, number one, you know, conduct civic and voter education early, and also put mechanisms in place of curbing electoral violence, because violence is also one of the reasons why people don't step out to go and vote, because it's just too risky. I mean, I don't want to think I'll just by me showing up to elect my preferred leader, I risk getting hurt, you see? So also putting systems in place to ensure voters that, you know what, actually it's going to be safe for you to come out and vote. And also mechanisms in place to ensure we have a fair and credible election, because as we all know, one of the issues we have is a trust deficit with these institutions to actually deliver a free, fair, and credible election. And I think lastly, just have champions who spread your agenda in terms of, because I mean, we have to play our civic responsibility as well as citizens, right? So also have champions who are able to spread that information and help reduce disinformation and the misinformation that is out here, especially right now, where people heavily consume information from the online spaces. And you can imagine the influence from even bloggers who are paid to actually spread fake information. Right now, there's so many politicians who are actually paying bloggers to do exactly that. So I think all of us have a role to do.
Right, thank you so much for that. I think before we proceed, you've just prompted us towards the next phase of our conversation, which is going to be specifically on the focus towards media and voter bribery and how those two intersect. But before we do that, I think I'll invite Kemi from You Lead Africa to give us just a short break and do a brief question and answer session. Kemi, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Wairimu, and thank you, our guests. Thank you, everyone that has joined us. We are just having a quick trivia round. I'm going to make it maybe 2 questions max so that we can get on with the conversation, because I feel like, yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really learning. So I want us to get back into that real quick, but we do like to keep our space very relaxed and interactive as well. So feel free, guys, as well, to leave your questions, to leave your comments in the comment section, to put up your hand. You can just keep your hand up, and then when we are at that point to just let you speak, then we will. So I'm just going to share really quickly here. And today's is, I guess, more of a geography session. So if you're those people, this one is yours. So if you have the answer, you can just put up your hand really quickly, or leave the answer in the comment box. The first question is: this Kenya National Reserve is separated from Serengeti National Park by the Tanzania-Kenya border. Which national reserve am I talking about? And this is open to absolutely everyone. So if you have the answer, type it in the comment section, put up your hand. I refuse to believe that nobody has this answer. There's no way. There's so many East Africans here. I didn't even put a hint because I believe in you. This one we all know. No? Really? Nobody knows this one? Okay, going once, going twice. I think not. It is the Masai Mara. I am surprised. Okay, I'm just seeing a hand go up now. Unfortunately, there were no hands when I needed them, but I bet you guys knew the answer. It's the Masai Mara. Both Masai Mara and Serengeti host one of the greatest spectacles in the natural world, the seasonal wild beast migration. That's what the photo is of. Okay, so this time I'll give you a little bit more time. Just have one more question, which is also geography related. This town in Mozambique shares its name with an island off the coast of Tanzania. I still see some hands up, but I'm thinking maybe were these hands up for earlier? I see Assumpta, your hand is still up. Do you have the answer? Okay, maybe not. Anybody else? I see Al Hassan. Do you have the answer?
Yeah, good afternoon and good evening. to
Yes, good evening.
wherever you are. Mine is not a question, and I think, in fact, I've been following you lead Africa, your activities, and this is spectacular. It's something that you are really doing to impact the world. I am very, very happy with whatever you are doing. May God bless you. May God richly bless you for whatever you are doing. Yes, I was just thinking of now that we are having the webinar for this session, especially with regards to
Okay.
Can you
I'm
hear
going
me,
to
please?
interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you for a moment because I think you want to contribute maybe towards the end. This particular session is for the trivia. So maybe let me first close the trivia, and then when Wairimu opens a session for the audience to ask questions, then you can contribute then, because we just need to wind up this particular part. Thank you. All right, let me just go ahead and give you guys the answer then. I see. Okay, I see a couple of answers in the comment box, but none of those are correct, unfortunately. But it is Pemba, which is similarly named. But let me let you guys get back to the next one. Hopefully you got a little something new. And I think the great thing is we already have a couple of people with their hands up to say something towards the end. So let me leave it at that. Thank you. Back to you, Wairimu.
Thank you so much, Kemi. I think you've just taught us that we don't know as much about our region geographically. But yeah, that's very funny, especially Mafunda being from Zanzibar. You know, Pemba is right there. But thank you for that. So I think just to continue this lovely session that we've been having, we can maybe just begin from the aspect of and just quickly go back to Miriam. So Miriam, the last discussion that we were having was specifically on how the last discussion we were having, Bina prompted a conversation on how voter bribery is something that's reported, can either be manipulated by the media and other aspects, right? Especially towards things such as influencers that currently exist within the status quo. Just to ask you as to how do you think the media reports voter bribery, and do you think there's a lot that can be done specifically by the media space in terms of voter bribery? Is it that they, especially social media with a lot of false information and fake news, how do you think the media in this case intersects with voter bribery?
Thanks, Wairimu. Does the media play a critical role? Yes, it does. I'll quote two scenarios. One, there's a study that was carried out in both the Philippines and I think Uganda. I'm not quite sure about Uganda, but I remember about the Philippines. And it was around when you accept bribes. I'm just paraphrasing. When you accept bribes, it directly translates to you voting in corrupt leaders, and they will use the monies to pay themselves back, for lack of a better word. So just having that connection, like one thing leads to another, and that's how it affects you as an individual in your small local home. And voter bribery did not 100%, diminish, but it went way lower. So messaging is very, very critical around this time. If the media and if all of us, mainstream media and both mainstream media and social media, if we are very keen on messaging, and as Bina was saying, trying to not just any form of messaging, just trying to link up one that leads to another, then that's the way to go. Number two, if I know all of us were able to, or rather I am hoping we got our hands on the Kriegler and Wako reports. And one of the things they were stating is negative ethnicity and hate speech perpetrated by the media is actually largely to blame for the post-election violence in 2008. That just goes to show that in both scenarios I have given, both in the Philippines and what we have witnessed previously here in Kenya, it can go either way. And they are it's a very, very powerful mode of, delivering, speaking and preaching peace. We've talked about civic education here, but I've always been quoted saying we need to go way above, over, and beyond just civic education. We've done so much of it. I'm not saying that we need to stop, but can we, on the other hand, preach political education? Because civic education tells you how to vote. It doesn't necessarily tell you why to vote. And social media here can go a long way. When you tell our young people, when you tell the electorate, this is the reason why you need to vote, not just necessarily go register as voters. That doesn't make sense to them. It doesn't directly translate to why I need to vote. And political education goes a step further to educate people on some of these roles we are talking about. When you vote in your MCA, one of the benefits is 1, 2, 3, and the jurisdiction is within 1, 2, 3. So civic education is great. Now people understand they need to vote. We need to go a step further and make them understand why they need to vote. I think that question has not been answered, and social media presents a very great platform for us to do that. And we don't have to wait for the IEBC to do some of these things. It is an individual responsibility. All of us here are representatives of different organizations. You can imagine I have at least 250 viewership on my WhatsApp status alone. It doesn't cost me anything. So taking it as a responsibility to actually preach peace, educate people, because we are the minority who actually know some of these things, and just having that sort of mindset that you as an individual, you as Wairimu, myself, we can actually make use of social media and solve some of these challenges.
Thank you for that. I think especially for narrowing on how every individual, I think, within this space that we exist within the region has a lot to do, or has a role to play specifically within how they use the information, how they share the information. So I think many times we view it from like a very top-down perspective, but I think it can also have a very bottom-up approach. And yes, thanks for that. So again, if you're joining us from wherever you're coming from, please feel free to just say hello in the chat and tell us where is it you're joining us from. We just want to know, and we want to welcome you first of all to the conversation, but also just to find out where we're all placed. Okay, so I think John, if you're ready, we can also maybe begin to discuss the question of voter bribery and accountability. So do you think that given the systems that exist, given the systems that exist, do voters concede, or do they concede their right to accountability once they accept voter bribery? Because I think Miriam has just talked about how, to a large extent, it means that if politicians in this case are bribing at the voter stage, right, it means that they have to account for that money at a later stage, which is going to be through corrupt governments. So do you think voters have a right to accountability, or do you think they cede certain rights to accountability because of accepting bribes?
Thank you very much, Wairimu. Let me first start by saying that it is sad that our communities now are maybe now normalized incompetence in leaders, but you will go to the ground and you hear people say, we know for sure that the next 5 years will be a no-show from this Mheshimiwa. So we are taking our share now, so that when you go and disappear without nothing, then we will have no questions. So you see, even in that alone, it already answers the question that yes, they've gone back, normalized it, sat at their comfortable position, and said, let us now wait for another 5 years before we can elect another person, or give this same person another opportunity to continue looting and being incompetent without asking them questions. So like Miriam is saying on the role of us all in doing civic education, we do not understand. And I'm sorry to say this about my community, because I've interacted with people since I started campaigning. People just know that the MCA is to represent, legislate, and to oversee. But if you ask them what they are legislating upon and what they are overseeing upon, they will not tell you. And so I remember at some sessions, it was just an exchange on social media. And I was arguing with some random person online. And they are here saying that the MCS cannot do anything about lack of sporting facilities because that is not their role, it is the governor's role. So you see again that disconnect on what role the MCS plays in the devolution government to oversee the executive wing, which is headed by the governor and the CECs. Then it becomes very difficult to even ask questions to our MCS because we assume anything that only comes to the ward is the only thing they can have power over or to just oversee, which becomes a very sad situation. So I want to believe that yes, when we receive these bribes and receive them very comfortably, we are giving these people an extra power. I was campaigning and just doing my budget, and I'm looking at how much money I could spend if I edit. Unfortunately, I don't. I would spend about 1.5 million on these campaigns to become an MCA. And this is on branding, on communications, on ensuring that my logistical team goes around and things are running smoothly. On the other hand, my competitors, there's someone who's already spent over 5 million and they're still going. And you see now official campaigns are just starting. So I was even asking myself, are people not even asking themselves what is in the MCS position or any elective position that we do not know that people have to spend all these resources to just get that seat? And I think even most of the aspirants who are going into it now, apart from a few of us, have already seen a gap that they will go in, they will not be asked questions by anyone. And you see again now, when there are no questions, we cannot hold anyone accountable. So it becomes a very tough situations, a catch something situation where we have all the power constitutionally, but we have no power realistically because we have given it to them. And they are saying it to us aspirants. You see, it is not a thing that I am saying as an aspirant myself. It is them telling me that from the previous regimes, we've realized we do not do anything. So we are eating what is duly ours now, and you will go eat yours for the next 5 years. And I think it is normal almost everywhere. Over to you.
Thank you for that. Well, that's very profound, especially on that last bit in terms of the normalization of it. I think that's how we're talking about the system, how to a certain extent voter bribery is something that has become very systematic in a lot of contexts that we exist within. So thank you for that, John. And finally, we'll move back to Miriam. Sorry, sorry. Finally, we'll.
Sorry, Warimo. Sorry, Warimo.
Yes.
Before you go to Miriam again.
Sorry. Yes.
What was the name of the other speaker? Sorry, I'm forgetting it.
Bina.
From Badili, Africa. Yes, sorry.
Bina. It's actually, we were actually going to Bina. It's me who miscommunicated.
Bina talked something about the institutions. And at times we want to blame the institutions, but there's not much they can do because of all these legalities. You see, every person who's caught with a corruption case, for example, is hanging on to Article 99, which says if they've not exhausted all appeal rooms, then they are still not guilty until all those appeal proceedings have been added to. And that is why when you see all the reports that were done by ESCC, of the 241, almost all of them had their cases pended in court. And so IBC has nothing to do about that. It will only say Article 99 is allowing me to clear this person because they have a running appeal. ESCC can only propose that this person has this and this and this affair, but if their case again is running in court. So I think, unlike the BBI was trying to change the constitution without again offering proper solution to such gaps, then we need to find a way of amending the constitution to become a bit tougher, and especially on how national resources are being used. Because if we don't do that, they will use the same loophole to just go ahead, because it is very sad. IBC has no power. And then unfortunately, again, you see what the courts are doing. Like, I'll just give an example. The case of Aisha Jumwa, a court just said they've pended it until after elections. So what happens if she wins elections and she has all these state resources to use to even protect herself, and now nothing can be done against all the other cases of corruption that have been on her name? So it becomes really difficult. So I think, like, again, we've been saying repetitively, is we need proper civic education. Proper civic education in the sense that, like Beatrice was saying, it is not only why, but how important. Of what importance is it to have a person who is of high integrity in any public office? Because the more we vote in the same people, the more we recycle these leaders, the more we stand a chance of losing as a country. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that, John. I think first you've been able to preempt the following question that I think we're going to raise, but also just to note for those who are tuning in from the region, I think we're using some abbreviations that you might not be familiar with. IEBC is the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission in Kenya, which generally does the vetting and approval process for electoral candidates. And other terms that you might hear, I think, us using within the conversation are things such as the EACC or the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. So just so you're familiar and you can flow with us. Okay, so I think finally, Bina, there's a lot of questions that have been posed to you. And even then, right, I think just to conclude or to tie up this question or this aspect of institutions and the accountability that they provide within themselves. So two questions for you. First is, what do you think the economic and political impacts of this voter bribery system are? And then what do you think we can do in terms of improving the policies or even the existing institutions to be able to curb the problems? I think John has been able to tell us things such as we need to strengthen the ability of IEBC, because again, innocent until proven guilty, right? The most they can do is the most they can do to a certain extent is sort of say that this individual, in terms of actually the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, right? The most that they can actually do is investigate and then recommend. So what do you think we can do to improve the capacity of these institutions? Do you think there's need for stronger policy? What recommendations do you bring about?
Gosh, I'm sorry, Remo. I think I was losing my network. Please repeat the question, maybe the last bit, or maybe just the question.
No problem, no problem. No problem. So John, I think, was responding to the idea of the inability of the incapacity of the institutions in themselves to be able to enforce a lot of the issues to do with voter bribery and corruption. And I think he was talking about things such as the need to strengthen the capacity of, for example, the EACC to just not necessarily make it a recommending body, but to give it more power. So the first question that I was posing to you is, what do you think the political and economic impacts are specifically of voter bribery? But in addition to that, how do you think we can strengthen the institutions that are currently in place? Do you think there's need for better policy? How do we make sure, for example, that IEBC doesn't approve certain candidates and that they won't get to the ballot? I mean, they won't get to the nomination stage and hence won't get to the ballot.
Thank you so much. And maybe just to also quickly say thank you. I think what my sister Miriam was talking about political education, I think it's more or less actually civic education, because I think the difference is just voter education is different and civic education is different. I think we are speaking about the same thing. I think voter education perhaps is what we see happening right now, disseminating information to help voters understand their rights and the processes and their participation in elections. So in terms of the systems, most certainly, I think I agree in terms of the policies and the laws. But even when I talk about how systems fuel some of these things, there's so many other systems. I mean, there's so many other institutions, whether it's political parties, and again, for IEBC, I think I agree with John, and for where I stand as well is the fact that for some time now, also IEBC has always been underfunded to also carry out its mandate, and we also see stakeholders coming on board last minute to also support them in carrying out their mandate effectively, and sometimes even the bills they propose to Parliament, we also see them being approved last minute, like the electoral bill, the political parties bill. So some of these bills are also approved last minute again. And if you're approved way before, it's easier for citizens to understand them and also the impact of those bills on their quality of participation during elections. So I think also an institution like Parliament working closely with the IBC and supporting their mandate, because half the time, I think the blame from also the citizens has always been all the structural changes we see happening 1 year to the election or a few months to the election. Why can't they actually start early? And when you actually also interrogate further and have this conversation with IBC, they also throw back the blame to also Parliament. Like, we presented this, it wasn't approved. And even the change of leadership for IBC, we see that happening last minute, like a few months to the election is when you're talking about changing the leadership, changing the commissioners. So I think those are things also that could start way early, and we could push for that and support structures and systems that can ensure that happens in good time. I don't know if I've responded to that, Wairemo.
Yes, I think you've fully responded to that. I think there was also just another question in terms of what do you think the political and economic impacts of this voter bribery system are, in your opinion?
Oh, okay. Thanks for that. I think I want to start by the fact that when you look at even the current debt that we have right now, in fact, I even already feel sorry for the incoming government and what they even have to do to try and manage the public debt. I was in a meeting today and we're interrogating the economy, and 67% of the revenue that is collected in Kenya, imagine, it goes to managing public debt. You can imagine the impact of that. That is money that could be put into improving our healthcare, whether it's education, creating a business-friendly environment for young people to thrive. So the impact of also voter bribery and us not understanding and voting in leaders, value-based leaders, and visionary and wise leaders is exactly that. How are they going to move this country from where it is to a country that serves us, serves our needs, expands the opportunity for us, where women don't even have to die giving birth outside hospitals like Pomwani, the cases we've been seeing, right? Where people don't even have to like die giving birth at home, where we don't see, where we have about 800,000 young people graduating every other year, and the job market can only accommodate about 50,000. So I think that is the impact in terms of our economy. And like I said, the leaders who are coming in, how are they even going to manage this debt that we're talking about that is impacting us in every other way? Already, when you look at how our economy works, we've already defaulted in a couple other debts that we're supposed to clear. What does that mean? It means the next time again we want to go borrow from outside, we are considered as a high-risk borrower. And what happens to a high-risk borrower? Now you have to pay with higher interest rates because you're a high-risk borrower. So what is the impact of debt to all of us? And I mean, as a young person, all factors constant, if you actually don't die sooner, you live with you live longer with the poor choices that the leaders are making. You know, at the end of the day, you bear the brunt of the choices these leaders are making longer. So if you're probably going to die at 80 or 90, you can imagine how many more years you have to bear the consequences of poor climate change. If our leaders don't even think about how does the environment intersect with every other sector, the agricultural sector, which is like the biggest employer, I mean, being underfunded, and it's the biggest employer, but it's being underfunded, right? So if you have a leader who doesn't even understand which areas am I supposed to invest in some more that can open up spaces and opportunities for young people or the most vulnerable in the society, right? And that is the impact we're talking about. Like, these poor choices lead to leaders who don't even understand what they need to do, right? So I think that's how I see it, and I hope that will change.
I think that's completely true. and very, I think, very profound, specifically on the aspect of how you think the citizens who get that kitu kidogo at the end of the day end up paying for it later on, for example, by having to supplement public debt with majority of their budget, which as opposed, and which in itself is a trade-off against other amenities that we generally don't have, such as health and education. I think amazing. I think that's just the correlation between our access to services and the choices that we make within the campaigning and within the electoral process. Okay, so thank you for that. And I think
just to Iremo, just to say also, it leads also to exclusion of more young people tapping into the leadership spaces, because honestly, how many young people have that kind of wealth, that kind of money to actually dish out during this moment? The other day, I was telling a friend of mine, I participated in the political party primaries because, like I said, it's a, I think once the political party primaries heavily determine whether you're going to win the election in the long run or not. And I hope this election will be different because there are so many independent candidates, and I hope we don't just vote, like a suti, the way we say in Kenya, but that we actually vote for a leader we believe in, whether they have a political party ticket or not. And I was telling my friend in the primaries that I participated in at the ward level, literally it was I want to say a money primary, then that determines whether you're going to actually get the certificate or not. So even on that particular day, as I watched what was happening, and first of all, let me say there was a very low voter turnout compared to other political party primaries I have participated in, especially in 2017. This particular year, there has been a very low voter turnout across the country, actually, with the data that has come in. And I was just thinking, even on that particular day, because that is the day you actually literally experience voter bribery at the highest level, because people know I need to win the certificate. How many young people have that kind of wealth at the end of the day? So even for us young people who actually take those bribes, we also exclude other young people who want to serve and have a heart for service.
Right. I think, yeah, this is an amazing conversation. I think also personalizing our very own actions as to how they not only harm ourselves, but they also harm the people around us, right? Given the fact that I think just even in the context of John, who when budgeting for his campaign knows that to a large extent doesn't necessarily have the same capacity, especially economically, to be able to fund the campaign as other individuals are, and majority of those funds are in fact going to voter bribery. I think to a large extent, all of us or everyone contributing within that system are then also impacting individuals or candidates, for example, such as John, who maybe no one will care to know the kind of good agendas that they have in the long run. So I think that's amazing, just tying it in as to how we all have a contribution towards the system that we exist within and how we also further marginalize ourselves and harm ourselves. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of the question session, and just to also welcome a few people who I think have just come in from the chat. I think we're seeing individuals from the Benin Republic, we're seeing individuals from Nigeria, Ghana, Karibu, as we say in East Africa, and also I think more individuals coming in from places such as Ethiopia. We welcome you to the chat. So at this particular juncture, we'd like to welcome questions. So feel free to raise your hand so we can, if you'd want to speak, or feel free to type within the chat, because we'll also be reading the questions that are within the chat. So anyone with any questions, just feel free to raise your hand. Questions, comments, actually, I think we had a comment earlier, so maybe this would be the right moment to maybe make those comments or even just address certain questions or issues to certain panelists before we do the closing remarks. Okay, so I think as people are still maybe getting ready to structure their questions, we might begin with the questions that are within the chat, or the comments that exist that are in the chat box. Okay, so 1 second. Yes, Prince, as we try to read the questions in the chat, please proceed.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you're
Can you,
audible. Yes.
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Good. Well, I believe that, well, again, I'm calling from Nigeria. I believe the issues are clear. The issues cut across. Is part of what I call, unfortunately, underdevelopment process, and which also carries along with it corruption, indecency, and above all, not having respect for our people. Because getting inducement or anything that will make it not right for you to vote, because your vote is your power. Your vote is your destiny. Your vote is the process of development. And I believe that we need a lot to do to create awareness, to educate our people, to share experience. People in Nigeria, organizations in Nigeria like us, we are prepared to collaborate with others. Let us move the process. Let us put the issue at the center stage and people will listen. Today, we talk about African free trade. And African free trade has a market of over 1.5 billion people. And then you're talking about the gross domestic product of almost $3.5 trillion. If we don't get it right, if we don't have the right policy, the right people, because voting also gives us the opportunity to have the right people, the right leaders to direct their affairs. All these things are something that will affect us. People amass money. What do? They go and invest outside Africa. They develop other countries. They develop other continents. And Africa is supposed to be the largest continent. We're talking about potentials. We talk about hope. We need to move from potentials and hope to reality. And I believe that if there is anything we can take away from here, is to start to build relationship, to build structures, to build institutions, and to let our people realize that all these things you are doing is just a short term. You are more or less creating an environment that will not be sustainable, that the future generations will continue to blame us. Africa has remained a continent that has not developed. And if we are not careful, unfortunately, and I pray we do not get to that stage, we still remain like this in the next 10 years. But I pray that it will not happen. If we don't want it to happen, you and I must work together, must see what you can do. We've sent you the details about who we are, about what we do on the sketch, and I believe all of us can work together. Thank you very much. We've been involved in most of your activities, but I think also you need to reach out. You need to not only reaching out, you need to engage. You need to let us appreciate that all of us, we have one common purpose, one common vision, one common objective of sustainable livelihood for our people and increase gross domestic product for our people. That is the only way we can move. We thank you.
Thank you for that. I think thank you, first of all, for that different context and in terms of maybe the Nigerian context, but again, also still facing the same challenges. And also thank you in terms of, I think, the similar work that you're also doing towards changing systems. And yes, thank you for joining us for this conversation. I think your input has been incredible. So I'll read a comment from the chat and then we'll go to Edoru, to give us a brief comment. So I think Oriema Edison tells us in the chat that in Uganda, media has played a very big role in exposing voter bribery. Number of candidates have been trending on different media spaces, distributing money, food, clothes, just to make electorates vote for them at the end of the day. At the end of the day, incompetent leaders, At the end of the day, incompetent leaders are voted in, and the burden still goes back to the community because automatically there shall be poor services delivery, exploitation, etc. Because many leaders will first concentrate on paying back a lot of sorry, on paying back. Sorry, 1 second. I think this is much easier. Yes, a lot of leaders will focus on paying back what they have spent during campaigns. So we can still use the same media spaces to advocate for free and fair elections without bribes, intimidation, etc. And in Uganda, young people have come with initiatives of youth manifestos where we are all telling our leaders to pick from us what we want them to do for us, but not what they want us, not what they want to do for us. So this I think is an MOU, and I think they go on to tell us specifically about the commitment of these youth manifestos and how they're going to be actualized. But thank you for that, Oyama. I think that's also echoing a lot of things that were raised by John in his speech, and I think even specifically Bina when she was telling us how this then impacts a lot of the service delivery that we get at the end of the day. Okay, so Edoru, please feel free to ask your question. Before you do, maybe Prince, if you could please mute. When you ask your question, please remember to mute so we also don't distract the next speaker. Okay, Edoru.
Yes. Nimo, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So I think the contextualization that I will elect to offer is one that observes voter bribery within the framework of campaign finance. And I think here we just need to understand two fundamental things. First, that the essential problem with voter bribery or the games that finance plays in politics is that it often becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. So the electorate expect money from politicians because politicians offer them money. But secondly, that politicians are willing to offer them money because they know the electorate are expecting it from them. So we have expectations on both sides that merely generate a cycle that is almost impossible to break. But secondly, the fundamental challenge is that when finance enters politics, it becomes a race to the top. So if, for example, one of the speakers offers 1.5 million shillings to run their campaign, the only way I can achieve an outcome equivalent to or better than them is if I am willing to offer 2 million. And as such, the only way the next person can achieve anything better is if they are willing to offer 3 million. So the problem with that is that it becomes a race to the top and everyone is competing to see that they can offer more money to the voters. I think then that the question that we need to be asking, and I hope we can have a discussion about this, is the role that finance should and the role that finance presently plays within the political sphere. Because for as long as, and this is my honest conviction, for as long as we continue the modality of campaigns that currently exist, in which finance becomes the central component of the political campaign, as opposed to the ideas that these leaders will espouse, then these problems are going to endure. So I hope that as we think about these problems, we begin to have honest conversations about the role of money in politics and the extent to which that role can be contained in order to achieve beneficial outcomes for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Edoro. I think a lot of your sentiments are echoing, I think, views that we had from John, specifically even in terms of the financial challenges and issues that come about within the campaign process. So we'll have our, I think, final comment from Mabil. Please try to make it brief. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wairimu. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, I don't want to make a comment, but I wanted to ask a question. But I just don't know if we still have the panelists listening to me. And my question is very direct, considering the context that has been given by the panelists, and what has been given by Prince, by Edoru, and many others. I just want to understand, like, what must young people and voters, like, for instance, do to guard against voter bribery? Because then it's something that continues to happen, discussions continue to happen, but the cycle continues every day. So I just want to understand from the panelists, especially this young man that is contesting to get into a position of power as an MCA. What does he think voters must do in order to guard against voter bribery? Like in a very realistic manner, what must be done?
Thank you so much, Abil, for that question. And I think you've sort of already directed it to John, but I think any member of the panel can be able to address it when it comes to the final comments. So just, I think, to read the last comment in the chat, and this is coming from Al-Hassan Nuhu. So Al-Hassan says that I also think more people and youth should be empowered on entrepreneurship and should be well educated on it, the effect of being lazy. Majority of the people accept bribes because of starvation, poverty, lack of finance, lack of jobs, etc. So equally, we should look around this as well. So I think that's good in terms of the questions towards what are the impacts, or what are the push factors that drive individuals towards accepting bribes, right? Within the context of the global South, issues such as starvation, poverty, lack of finance. So to begin, I think, or to continue the last session, we'll now have each of the panelists giving us their final comments, unless there are no more questions. Maybe just, are there any more questions before the panelists begin? Okay, I think, John, you can begin by making your comments first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wairimu, and thank you very much from the speaker who asked the last question, because that is a very important question. What practical thing must we do to ensure that voter bribery ends? And this is what I will say. Number one, if we continue to have the same attitude in leadership as we have now, where people only think of maintaining the status quo, which is vulnerable and poor societies, we are likely not to do anything much about voter bribery, even in the coming election after the 2022 one. So what we must do is, one, in our own spheres of influence, and I'm talking about an individualistic sphere, me, you, Miriam, Beatrice, Bina, and any other person here, let us try to utilize all available resources and opportunities and share them with the communities as much as we can from our individual spaces. Let us not wait and say an organization will have to come. Let us start small initiatives. I remember when I'm doing movement building with activists, one of the things we say is, we will never have a revolution in this country if we do not have proper conversations from the family level. We need people to have bonds and a small movement, even in their house, so that when we are pressed by tough economic times like we are now, everyone feels the pain to come out. It is not about an activist like me and another person coming out to tell people it is time that we need to get to the streets, because people don't own up that revolution. It is time now we start to have even family conversation on the cost of living, on what leadership and politics affects in our lives. And so people will start to own up everything. And in that regard, then we'll start to have more people interested in conversations around voting proper leaders with high levels of integrity. And that will, in the end, again, benefit our societies. So without much ado, again, to just give my closing remarks, first to appreciate you for that awesome moderation, to appreciate the fellow speakers there, and even all the people that tuned in. But most importantly, this is an election year. We want to elect a set of people that will be our representatives, that will be legislators for the sake of this country. Like you had Beatrice say, we are going to spend a lot of our national income in repaying debts. And this is only because of poor legislation by the people who were given the mandate to legislate, because they keep on raising the debt ceiling. And the more they raise the debt ceiling, the more we are able to borrow, and the more the demand to pay back now again increases. And most importantly, then, one, very accountable people into leadership, and two, be very active citizens so that we are able to even ask the simple of questions. We set aside money for this. If we did a social audit after the project has been done, will we see value for the money that was set aside for that such programs? So that will be that for me. And I want to hope that every young person who's running in these elections still has the energy to keep going. I know it is very, very tiring, but let us keep the fight. Haluta, continue.
Thank you for those last statements. I think Aluta continua specifically to everyone who's running, but also to everyone who's championing for change specifically within this election campaign. Okay, so I think we'll now have Miriam to give us her last views and thoughts and specifically address a lot of the questions that have been raised.
Thank you, Wairimu. Someone asked a very critical question on how we finance our campaigns here in Kenya, and I'd just like to shed some light on that. Under particularly Section 24 of the Political Parties Act 2011, it established a political parties fund, and what this means is that the national government then is allowed to fund political parties, and this particular act was amended not long ago, and I think, is it 0.3? Correct me if I'm wrong, Kenyans. 0.3 of government revenue is supposed to support political parties. Well, that is not new. A lot of countries and a lot of democracies have that sort of arrangement with different percentages here and there. The challenge then comes in during accounting or rather regulating these monies, because we are all aware that political parties spend way more than they have been allocated. So then if we can come back and say, just explain how you are able to get 200% more than what has been allocated to you, then I think we'd kill some of these numerous cases of bribery. So I just thought I needed to address how that functions. A solution, I think, for me, and from a theoretical point of view, we need to really disrupt the supply, both the supply and demand sides of bribery, of electoral and elections bribery. And what this means is those on the supply side, and those ones are politicians and institutions that are supposed to stop such cases. Then we need to solve that by more institutionalization through resources and capacity building of our institutions like IEBC and DPP, and the Public Service Commission and the judiciary. So institutionalizing our institutions. And on this other side, we as the electorate, we as people who accept the bribes, because it's two-way traffic. If it's given, that definitely means there's someone who's at the receiving end. I think we need to really, and someone had mentioned it here, we need to instill some of these values way back from our education curriculum. It needs to be part of who we are. And again, as I mentioned, it boils down to you as an individual. If you stop it at your level and your smaller circle and the people you interact with, it's the little things that build up to the ultimate solution. So that ultimately breaks the political economy of bribery, if I may call it that. Lastly, thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely. It's been very enlightening, and it is discussions such as this that actually change minds and change perspectives across the continent. I think my parting shot, it's an electioneering year in Kenya, and for Kenyans, voting is a right, much as it's a responsibility. So vote wisely, and wait for results in peace. And the people who are vying, John, I have seen the amazing work you're doing on ground. We appreciate you as young people, and all the best in the elections. Thank you so much, Wairimu. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much, Miriam. It's been a pleasure having you, and I think also a lot of your contributions have been extremely profound and educative to all of us on this platform. And finally, we'll have Bina giving us her final statements and parting shots. Karibu.
Thanks, Wairimu. I think this is the thing when you actually speak last, when you have both the first speakers, and I don't want to say, they've actually said what I wanted to say. But again, I think I'll still go back to institutions and say this. I like the question that was asked, like practical ways. Yani, this is just experience, guys. I just mentioned about just the political party primaries we had. At the end of the day, yes, we have independent candidates, but before we have a sizable number of them in parliament who can actually vote against or for a bill in parliament, for now, political parties are the vehicles that form the government of the day, at the end of the day. And if we could even support young people to even win these party tickets, right? People win during political primaries with less than 300 votes, with less than 400 votes, not even the thousands that, not even 1,000. People win with very, very little votes. That is one way we can actually show up and say, you know what? I am actually going to support this young person and ensure they have a ticket. Once they have a ticket, they are halfway through to actually winning the bigger election. Number two, support young people in every way, with whichever resources you have. And at times, it's just not even money, but even accompanying them to their communities when they're going to campaign, right? Because we're talking about young people not even having the finances. I'm pretty sure even when we're here on the phone, we know 1, 2, 3, or 4 people who are running for office. And it's even us who don't believe in them. We're like, oh, this election has been decided. Oh, you're young. Oh, you still have many more years ahead of you to actually run for office again, even if you don't win. Support people, help people print posters, help people even get whatever, t-shirts, participate in young people's strategic teams, right? Be a part of it. Be a part of a young person's think tank. 2 young people's think tank right now, despite even running an NGO and having a couple activities and being a young mom. But I'm like, you know what? If I can even support with my thoughts, if I can accompany you to the community and convince 2 more people, I think for me, that makes a big difference, because at times you go to the community and people are like, funny, it's only how many, when you only know these people here at the community. As in, show up in a big way. You don't have to be voting in the community where that young person is actually running for office, but you can actually show up. Imagine if you have an aspirant, whatever, in a different county, and you show up, you're showing people from that county. Imagine even us from this other different county. We believe in this person's leadership. And that is why we have traveled all the way to actually come and support them. 3 weeks, down the line, I'm going to travel to a county that is a bit 7 hours away, imagine, to just support a candidate there. So I think there's so many other ways we can actually show up for these people. Again, in terms of policies that we're talking about and laws, even when we say that the EACC, even the IBC, even as we say that they can do much, I think we can even strengthen these policies and laws to ensure that if you have a pending case and you're a corrupt leader, then we should not clear you until you're done with your case. How do we support the institutions like the judiciary to even fast-track corruption cases? So if you have a pending case, just clear the case first, then run for office. If the time period will have lapsed, then sorry, and I think that is something we can also push for at the end of the day. And lastly, again, civic education. Like I said, voter education is how citizens participate in relation to understanding their rights as a voter. Civics should be continuous. It's continuous and systematic, delivery of information in terms of how citizens can participate in a democratic space, understanding their rights, how they can engage the government, the different political processes, social processes, economic processes. I'm telling you, honestly, the huge disconnect between how voting translates to quality of life will even make many more people not show up as voters, especially in our country, Kenya, in this election. And the narrative that the election has been decided. This election is just not about the presidency. It is bigger than the presidency. It's about your MCA, it's about your member of county assembly, it's about your member of parliament, it's about your your women rep, it's about your senator. So many young people are also, saying it has already been decided. Those same young people, I was speaking even in a chat session with about 400 young people, and majority of them who say that they believe it has already been decided or rigged were referring to the presidential level. When I asked them, do you know who your MCA is? Do you know who your member of parliament is? They did not even know. And the person who directly impacts the quality of your life largely is also the MCA and the MP. If your MP steals the CDF money meant for whatever, whether it's bursaries or development in your community, you cannot blame the president for that. You know, they didn't even know who was the incumbent. And that is how you end up voting an incumbent who has been a total failure, who has been a corrupt leader. So I think there's still so many ways we can actually plug in as young people and not leave the burden for even doing civic education or political education to just NGOs who depend also on donor money. Professional young people, you know, even if you're not struggling with a job, you have a role to play. It should not even be the role of the poor or the sick to fight for their rights to access, whether it is health or to access employment. I think we should step up, we should recognize our privilege and step up for people who don't even have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for, I think, those very spirited words, and also just, I think that was generally also a call to action to every one of us, and even specifically to youth representatives and individuals within this space. Okay, so I think before we conclude, just a few, because I think we're way beyond time, just to summarize a few things that I think we can all take home in terms of the conversation that we've had today, and even just so you can think about this throughout your week and throughout your interactions with everyone. First, please feel free to follow us on our social media pages. I think they have been pasted in the chat. So this is in terms of the One Young EAC for Kenya 2022 campaign. So please feel free to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and whatever platform, and share with us whatever comments or views you think you have regarding the topic or any other topic in terms of the election campaign in Kenya, but also just in terms of, I think, the key highlighted points that we've received today. I think the first is in terms of the need to strengthen the accountability structures that exist within the status quo. I think the way Bina has talked about things such as like pushing for change, for example, so that the IEBC doesn't clear people with pending court cases. I think secondly is a more internalized call for action specifically to all of us. I think let's support youth campaign. I mean, let's support youth campaigns. Let's support youth individuals who are running for places of, for positions of office. Let's not only just do this, but for example, like even on Twitter or any other platform, you know, show up for them, given the fact that they're actually running against institutional barriers, such as things such as bribery and everything. And even just another call to ourselves to not directly participate in any form of actions, for example, such as voter bribery, because I think we've seen the link to accountability and to the lack of provision of services that generally this leads to us, right? So let's not shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to that. And I think just to thank all the panelists that have been present with us here today. I think Miriam, thank you so much. John, thank you. Bina, thank you. We've all had an incredibly amazing session. I think we've all developed our capacity a lot, specifically when it comes to a lot of issues, even to do with the composition of the systems in place. I think the problems within the structures, and even also just identifying things that we can be able to improve upon ourselves. I think I'd also like to thank the ULEAD team who has been technically supporting. Thank you, Kemi, even for the brief break that we had in terms of the quiz session. I think Kaze and the rest of the ULEAD team who are here technically supporting us. And thirdly, also I'd like to thank all the consortium partners who are not only present with us today, but have also been supporting not only the program, but a lot of the campaigns and what we've been doing. And just, yes, finally, my name is Wajimu Manyara, and I'm the EAC Youth Ambassador to Kenya. And I'd like to thank you all for participating today. So other than that, I don't think there's anything else to say. Please feel free to look in the chat before you leave so you can get the links. So after this session, you don't go following up on this conversation. Okay, thank you, everyone. Good night.
Africa, tusonga mbele mama Africa, Africa.
Around young people very often associate them with violence, treating them more as a threat than anything else. Insecuritized responses to young people, hard security approaches that make young people more frightened of their governments than anyone else, And this is completely counterproductive.
Peace education strives to create understanding and a common ground on strategies that benefit groups, individuals that are in conflict.
The children of today, they are the leaders of the 2063, but the young people of today, they are leaders of today.
Be mindful of what we do, especially for the digital hygiene part. It's really important.
Because most of the time when we look at the victims or people who are affected, we look at them as in form of numbers. We don't look at the potentials that they can bring into the conversation. And I think it is very important that not only the youth that have been victims, but every youth need to be meaningfully engaged, as well as also recognize what they can do and for them to be appreciated for what they have done.
Socio-economic integration in East Africa, it can only succeed if peace, stability, and security are established in the region. Article 124 of the treaty establishing the East African Community is very clear on issues of security, but also the strategies that we take to ensure our people move across the borders in East Africa with a lot of peace.
The need to change the narrative that young people are essentially perpetrators of violence and victims of violence.
Article 120 of the treaty calls on partner states to develop a common approach towards marginalized groups, including children and young people, EAC integrations without getting the youth involved. Long live the East African community, long live the young leaders. May God bless you all. Thank you for your kind attention.
Hi, my name is Philbert Aganyo from Nairobi Trust.
Je suis Glorieuse Douimana, je suis chargée des programmes au Centre d'initiative et d'action pour le développement.
In the past, young people have been at the forefront of perpetrating violence, hate speech, and being used instead of participating meaningfully in elections.
At this time in history, we are calling upon all the youth in Kenya to avoid misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, and violence.
Napenda kutoa ujumbe kwa Wakenya wenzangu wakati tunaelekea uchaguzi kwamba tunze amani iliyopo kwa ajili ya vizazi vya sasa na vijavyo.
La gouvernance démocratique repose sur des processus démocratiques, notamment les élections.
I stand for an informed, an engaged, an empowered young person who shuns every attempt of being misused by politicians for selfish gain, but instead one that champions positive peace.
So we call upon all young people to meaningfully participate pre the election, during the election, and after the election.
Invest our efforts in monitoring the election to ensure that there is peace in Kenya.
We are one young East African community for peace in Kenya 2022.
We are one young East African community for peace in Kenya 2022.
Kenya ya amani.
Kenya ni amani.
Kenya ya amani.
Kenya ya amani.